Every person in this file has already won. Scrooge has more money than he can spend. Gekko can move a market with a speech. Thorin owns an entire mountain of gold. Daniel Plainview has built the empire he once crawled through the dirt to reach. And every one of them behaves as if one final thing is still missing. That is the secret of greed. It does not measure what you have. It measures the distance between you and more. Then moves the line. 4 men, 4 different hungers. One word that never changes. More. This is the Dark Mirror Files, where we open the case on the mind behind the character. No heroes, no villains, just what's really driving them. The mistake almost every story about greed makes is treating it as a synonym for money. It is not. Money can buy food, time, safety, medical care, privacy, and choices. Wanting those things is not a sin. Wanting to improve your life is not a diagnosis. Being wealthy does not prove that a person is greedy, and having very little does not make anyone immune to it. Researchers who developed the dispositional greed scale use a much sharper working definition: the tendency to keep wanting more and to remain dissatisfied with what one already has. The important word is not money, it is more. That is also why the framers claim that happiness simply stops rising after $75,000 is too neat. A later collaboration between researchers who had reported different results found a more complicated pattern. For most people in their data, higher income was still associated with greater emotional well-being. An unhappy minority appeared to plateau at higher incomes. So this video is not going to pretend money never helps. It can. Greed begins when helping is no longer the point, when desire loses its stop condition. The goal does not produce rest, gratitude, or freedom. Reaching it only changes the number required for the next hit. In these 4 stories, that endless more changes shape. First, money becomes protection, then a score, then possession, and finally, domination, the need to win in a way that requires somebody else to lose. Those are not clinical stages. They are 4 mirrors, and the first one is the only man in this file who discovers a way out. Ebenezer Scrooge is often remembered as a man who loves money too much. Dickens gives us something more precise. Scrooge does not merely love money, he trusts it more than he trusts people. The ghost of Christmas past shows him as a child, left alone at school.
This school is not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected.
Then, as a young man welcomed into Fezziwig's noisy, generous world. And finally, as a fiancé, watching affection lose a competition he refuses to admit exists. Belle does not accuse him of becoming rich. She tells him that fear has reorganized his life. In the original text, all his other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the world's sordid reproach. That is a devastating distinction. He is not collecting pleasure. He is trying to become unreachable. The story does not give us permission to diagnose him, and loneliness does not automatically create greed, but it does show a repeated choice. Whenever human dependence feels uncertain.
What's that? On your cheek.
Nothing. Something in my eye.
Scrooge chooses the thing that can be counted, locked, and controlled. Money begins as a shield. Then, he forgets the shield was supposed to protect a life on the other side. By the time Marley returns, Scrooge has reduced responsibility to a ledger. He can calculate wages and interest, but not the cost of a cold office, an underpaid clerk, a sick child, or a nephew he has trained himself not to need. Marley's chain is not punishment dropped on him from outside. It is an inventory of small decisions, cash boxes, keys, locks, ledgers. Objects that once promised control have become weight. That is what makes Scrooge essential to this series. He proves greed is not an identity carved into a person forever. The ghosts do not take his money away. They restore the information his ledger excluded.
Good heavens. I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
He sees the warmth he abandoned. He sees what his employee's family carries without wealth. He sees a future in which people discuss his death as a business opportunity because that is the only language he taught them to use. And then he changes. He raises Bob Cratchit's salary. He gives without turning generosity into a transaction. He returns to his nephew's table. He does not stop being a businessman. He stops treating business as the complete definition of what a human being owes another. Scrooge recovers a stop condition. enough money to live, enough fear to recognize the wall, enough time left to walk back through it. The next man does the opposite. He takes the absence of a stop condition and sells it as a virtue. Gordon Gekko's great trick is not admitting that he is greedy.
I am not a destroyer of companies. I am a liberator of them.
It is making greed sound indistinguishable from every useful form of desire. At the Teldar paper meeting, he begins with a real grievance. Management owns almost none of the company and pays itself generously, while the business loses money. The room has a reason to listen.
Holders who have made a pre-tax profit of $12 billion. Thank you.
Then he performs the switch.
That greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
He folds the desire for money together with the desire for life, love, and knowledge, as if curiosity, devotion, ambition, and extraction were one moral force. This is how greed becomes respectable.
And greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the U.S.
It borrows the achievements of ambition while deleting ambition's finish line. Ambition can say, I want to build this company, master this craft, protect this family, or solve this problem. A goal can be completed. It can also be rejected when its cost becomes too high. Gekko's version cannot stop, because stopping would let the score freeze.
So tell me, Gordon, when does it all end, huh? How many yachts can you water ski behind? How much is enough?
And the score only means something besides somebody else's. That is why his language turns people into rankings. Companies are not communities to improve, they are positions to acquire.
But why do you need to wreck this company?
Because it's wreckable, all right?
Information is not knowledge, it is leverage.
Money itself isn't lost or made, it's simply transferred from one perception to another. Like magic.
Bud Fox is not simply a young man he mentors. He is useful access to a company Gekko wants. Bud mistakes proximity for belonging. He offers secrets, copies the suits, learns the rhythm, and begins treating every moral boundary as proof that he has not yet become serious enough. That line is funny because it is efficient. It also reveals the entire operating system. A friend can make a claim on you that does not improve the score. A dog, in Gekko's formulation, offers loyalty without equality. Everything difficult about relationship is replaced by ownership. Scrooge used money to hide from the world's judgment. Gekko needs the world to watch him win. That makes greed self-renewing. If wealth is security, there may be a number that feels secure. But if wealth is rank, somebody else can always rise. Yesterday's victory becomes today's baseline. The finish line moves because the other runners move. When Bud finally turns on him, the injury is not only financial. Gekko experiences disobedience as humiliation.
It's not a question of enough, pal. It's a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses.
The student has stopped reflecting the master's importance. The money was a score. But a score can still be transferred, spent, or lost. The next form of greed goes deeper. It turns what a person owns into what a person is. Thorin begins with a goal almost nobody would call greedy. He wants to return home. Erebor is not a random vault he discovers. It is his people's kingdom, taken by Smog, the place his family lost and his companions crossed the world to reclaim. The gold carries memory, sovereignty, and glyph. That legitimate claim is exactly what makes his transformation dangerous. Greed rarely introduces itself as, I want what I do not deserve. It is much more persuasive when it begins with something true. This was stolen from me. I earned this. I promised my people I would bring it back. Then Thorin reaches the mountain. The homeland is restored.
I am king under the mountain.
The dragon is dead. The hoard is his. And suddenly the one object he cannot find, the Arkenstone, feels more important than everything he has recovered.
You seek that which would bestow upon you the right to rule, the Arkenstone.
The story gives this distortion a name, dragon sickness. Whether we read it as a literal curse, a heightened character flaw, or a visual metaphor, its behavior is unmistakable. Ownership does not create peace.
You have no right to enter that mountain.
I have the only right.
It creates surveillance. Every ally becomes a possible thief. Every request becomes an attempted invasion. Every piece surrendered feels like a piece of the self. Lektown exposes the change. Its people help the company reach Erebor. Thorin promised them a share of the treasure. Then Smaug destroys their homes on his way to death. And the survivors arrive asking for what was pledged and what
You gave a promise.
You brought upon them only ruin and death.
they need to rebuild. Thorin has enough gold to keep the promise without meaningfully changing his life. He refuses anyway. That refusal is the difference between possessing wealth and being possessed by it. A resource can leave your hand and still have served you. An identity experiences every departure as mutilation. If you're watching this man differently than you did 10 minutes ago, that's the whole point. Hit like and stay with me. Bilbo sees that the war is forming around the jewel, so he gives the Arkenstone to Thorin's opponents as leverage for peace. From the outside, it is an attempt to save lives. From inside Thorin's greed, it is the ultimate betrayal. Bilbo has not merely moved an object, he has challenged the equation between the stone and the king. That is why Thorin nearly destroys the friendship.
I will not risk this quest for the life of one burglar.
That made the entire quest possible. The Hoard has reversed the purpose of the journey. His companions did not cross Middle-earth, so a king could sit alone behind a sealed gate. But once ownership becomes identity, the people who help secure it become threats to its purity. The film visualizes his return to himself as a confrontation with the golden image beneath his feet. The surface cracks. The dragon's shadow rises. Thorin finally sees that he has begun to resemble the creature he defeated.
He cannot see beyond his own desire!
Then he steps out of the hole. The treasure has not changed. Its position in his mind has. Like Scrooge, Thorin recovers the ability to place people above possession. Unlike Scrooge, he recognizes the cost so late.
Everything I did for them.
That redemption cannot restore the life his greed consumed. Protection built a war. Score created an endless race. Possession turned surrender into a threat to identity. The final man needs none of those things. Daniel Plainview does not want what you have.
I have a competition in me. I want no one else to succeed.
He wants the fact that you no longer have it. The first 15 minutes of There Will Be Blood barely need language. Daniel Plainview digs, falls, breaks his leg, drags himself across open ground with the silver that...
There's a whole ocean of oil under our feet. No one can get at it except for me.
We'll offer 100...
proves the pain was worth something. This is ambition in its most physical form: effort, risk, endurance, result. The film does not ask us to despise that will. It asks what happens when will becomes the only relationship a person trusts. Daniel builds an oil business and presents himself as a family man. H.W., the orphan son of a worker, killed at a well, sits beside him during land negotiations. The child's face makes the operation appear stable, local, human. It would be easy to say, Daniel never cares for him. The film is more uncomfortable than that. Daniel carries H.W. from the burning derrick. He touches him with tenderness. He shares routines and victories with him. H.W. is useful to the business, but usefulness and affection can occupy the same relationship. The tragedy is not that every feeling was fake. It is that Daniel eventually subordinates every feeling to the need to remain invulnerable and first. After the explosion leaves H.W. deaf, Daniel cannot communicate with the child he once used to communicate trust to everyone else. H.W.'s needs now interrupt the machine. Daniel sends him away. The song was welcome as a partner in the image. He becomes difficult as a separate person. Then Daniel tells the truth about the engine beneath everything. Notice what Daniel does not say. He does not describe a number he needs. He describes a world he wants emptied of rivals. Money is useful because it can buy distance, but distance alone is not enough. Other people must also fail, so their failure can prove that his isolation is superiority rather than loss. That changes the meaning of every victory. When Daniel defeats a competitor, the relief cannot last, because a world organized around competition keeps producing new opponents. A preacher, a landowner, an imposter, a son.
I look at people and I see nothing worth liking.
Even intimacy becomes a vulnerability test. The man claiming to be Daniel's half-brother briefly receives something no investor can buy: confession, companionship, the possibility that Daniel might not be alone by nature. When the claim proves false, Daniel does not merely remove a fraud. He destroys the witness to his need. Years later, HW returns as an adult and announces that he is leaving to build his own company in Mexico. It is not an attack. It is differentiation, a son forming a life beyond his father. Daniel hears a declaration of war. Daniel then weaponizes HW's origin. He reveals that he adopted him partly because a child's face helped him buy land. A fact that could have been confessed with shame or complexity becomes a blade. He needs HW to live not merely independent, but wounded. This is greed, after money has stopped being the object. Daniel already owns the house, the land, the oil, and the silence he said he wanted. The final act gives him the chance to prove what all of it purchased. Eli Sunday arrives desperate for money. Daniel has already beaten him economically. He could write a check, refuse, close the door. None of those outcomes would satisfy the score. Daniel has kept for years, so he makes Eli perform his own defeat. He forces the preacher to renounce the identity that once gave him power. Then, Daniel reveals that the valuable oil is already gone. The milkshake image sounds absurd because the transaction is already over. That is the point. Daniel is not negotiating for oil. He is staging a world in which another man has nothing left.
I drink your milkshake.
Not money, not authority, not even the dignity of believing his surrender bought something. Plainview's greed reaches its final form when acquisition is no longer enough. He must consume the meaning of the people used to stand upright. And once Eli has been financially defeated, spiritually humiliated, and physically destroyed, Daniel speaks the only stop condition he has left. "I'm finished" is the darkest joke in the film. Daniel has spent a lifetime behaving as if nothing could ever be enough. He finally reaches an ending only when there is nobody left in the room who can answer him. That does not mean every greedy person becomes Daniel Plainview. These 4 transformations are not an inevitable ladder, and fictional characters are not research participants, but the pattern matches what greed research keeps returning to: insatiability. A person can gain the reward and still teach the mind that the reward was only evidence to demand the next one. One research program found a revealing split. Higher dispositional greed was associated with stronger economic outcomes, but also with worse psychological outcomes. That is a correlation, not a moral verdict or a prediction about an individual. It is still important because it explains why greed can survive its own consequences. Sometimes it works. The person gets the promotion, the deal, the hoard, the land. Outsiders see the gain and assume the strategy succeeded. But if success cannot be converted into satisfaction, safety, generosity, or relationship, the strategy has not completed a life. It has only trained an appetite. Scrooge shows the exit. Not poverty, not shame, not pretending money has no value. He lets excluded costs back into the calculation. He sees the people behind the ledger and allows enough to mean that acquisition can stop while responsibility continues. Thorin sees it too. The gold remains valuable. It simply stops being more valuable than the people beside him. Gekko cannot accept that shift, because a scoreboard becomes meaningless when the game ends.
I create nothing.
Plainview cannot accept it because his victory requires an audience, and then requires the destruction of that audience.
I can't keep doing this on my own.
So enough is not one universal number. It is a rule written before desire rewrites the terms. What is this goal for? Which costs are disqualifying, even if the reward is real? What will success allow me to stop doing? If those questions have no answer, more is not a destination. It is an operating system. And operating systems do not become satisfied. They keep running. Greed says one more victory will finally make you safe. The next scene believes only one mind can be trusted. Pride? One question before you go. Which of these 4 crossed the line first, and what was the exact scene? Tell me below. If this one kept you here, leave a like. The next file opens on Star Wars. Anakin, Palpatine, Kylo Ren, and the machine one of them became. Subscribe. The case files stay open.